I stood in my grand Victorian home in Boston, a 68-year-old widow named Evelyn Harper, clutching a secret that could shatter my son's world. Michael, my 42-year-old boy, thought I was just a frail old woman, too weak to handle my own life. He schemed to tuck me away in his attic, believing I needed saving. Little did he know, I'd built a $9 million zero-cents real estate empire right under his nose. The sting of his betrayal fueled a fire in me. Why did he think he could control me? What would he do when he learned the truth? With every condescending word, I plotted my escape. I sold my home for $2,500,000, 0 cents, in a single defiant move, ready to unveil my power at a family dinner that would leave him speechless. Would he crumble when I revealed the fortune I'd amassed, or would he finally see the woman I truly am? My heart raced as I stepped toward a future where I'd rewrite my story, proving that age is no cage for ambition. The autumn leaves swirled outside my bay windows, painting the Boston suburbs in hues of amber and crimson. My home, with its creaking oak floors and ornate crown molding, wasn't just a house. It was a testament to decades of grit. I'd bought it 30 years ago, a fixer-upper no one wanted, and turned it into a gem worth millions. That was just the start. Over the years, I'd snapped up properties across Massachusetts, rental units, commercial spaces, even a quaint inn on the Cape. My portfolio, now valued at $9 million, 0 cents, was my pride, my fortress, my secret. I kept it locked away, not out of shame, but because I'd learned early that wealth invites envy, even from those closest to you. Michael, my only child, had no inkling of my success. To him, I was mom, baker of oatmeal cookies, knitter of scarves, a woman whose world should shrink with age. He'd call weekly, his voice laced with pity, asking if I'd remembered to take my vitamins or if the stairs were getting too hard. Each word chipped away at me, not because I doubted myself, but because I saw the man I'd raised slipping into a dangerous assumption that age equaled weakness. I'd raised Michael to be kind, but kindness, I was learning, could mask control. His latest idea, that I move into his attic for my own good, was the final straw. The attic, a dusty, cramped space where I'd be out of sight, out of trouble, out of my own life. The thought made my blood boil. I paced my living room, my reflection flickering in the antique mirror above the fireplace. At 68, I was no frail caricature. My silver hair was cropped stylishly, my posture straight from years of yoga. I could negotiate a lease faster than most brokers half my age, yet Michael saw none of that. He saw a widow, alone, vulnerable. He'd started rallying allies. My sister, Ellen, my neighbor, Callahan, even my financial advisor, who should have known better. "Mom, we're worried about you," he'd say, his brow furrowed in that rehearsed way. Worried? No, he was orchestrating a takeover, convincing everyone I was one bad fall away from disaster. I could have told him the truth right then. I could have pulled out my ledger, shown him the deeds, the bank statements, the proofs that I was sharper than ever. But I didn't. Not yet. There was a thrill in holding my cards close, in letting him underestimate me. I'd spent a lifetime proving doubters wrong. Bankers who scoffed when I, a single mother, applied for loans. Contractors who assumed I didn't know a stud from a joist. Michael's doubt was just another challenge, and I'd meet it on my terms. My plan began to take shape one crisp October morning as I sipped coffee at my kitchen table. The Boston Globe opened to the real estate section. A headline caught my eye: "Seller's market heats up in Greater Boston." My home, I knew, was a gold mine. Appraised at $2,200,000, 0 cents last year, it could fetch more now. Selling it would be my declaration of independence, a move so bold it would force Michael to see me anew. I called my realtor Susan, a no-nonsense woman who'd handled my deals for years. "List the house," I told her. "Top dollar, quick close." She didn't blink. Susan knew my knack for timing the market. As the for sale sign went up, I played my part flawlessly. I let Michael fuss over me, nodding when he suggested I downsize. I even let him tour me through his attic with its slanted ceilings and musty air, pretending to consider it. It's cozy, I said, my voice sweet, my stomach churning. Inside, I was counting down to the moment I dropped my bombshell. The sale moved fast. Within a week, I had 3 offers. I chose the highest, $2,500,000, 0 cents, cash from a young tech couple. The closing was set for November, just before Thanksgiving. Perfect timing for a family reckoning. I started house hunting, my sights set on Cape Cod. I'd always dreamed of a place by the sea where I could hear the waves and feel the salt air. I found it in a shingle-style cottage in Chatham with a wraparound porch and views of the Atlantic. At $1,800,000, 0 cents, it was a steal compared to Boston prices. I put in an offer, my heart racing with the thrill of reinvention. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement. I was done hiding, done shrinking to fit Michael's vision of me. Meanwhile, Michael's campaign intensified. He'd enlisted a lawyer to discuss guardianship options, a term that made my skin crawl. Ellen called, her voice soft with concern. Michael says you're forgetting things, Ev. Are you sure you're okay? I wanted to scream. Forgetting things? I could recite every property tax rate in Suffolk County, but I stayed calm, assuring her I was fine, all while my resolve hardened. Michael thought he was protecting me, but he was about to learn how wrong he was. As the closing date neared, I prepared for the family dinner where I'd reveal everything. I pictured Michael's face, the shock, the dawning realization that his mother was no damsel in distress. I'd invite Ellen, Mrs. Callahan, even the financial advisor who doubted me. They'd all hear the truth, that I, Evelyn Harper, had built an empire, sold my home, and chosen my future. The thought sent a jolt of excitement through me. This was my moment, my high noon. I stood in my living room one last time, the walls echoing with memories. Michael's first steps, late-night talks with my late husband, the quiet victories of my secret deals. I wasn't leaving those memories behind. I was carrying them forward to a life I'd define. At 68, I was just getting started. Michael thought he could box me in, but he'd soon see. I was the architect of my own destiny, and no one, not even my son, could take that away. The November air in Boston crackled with tension as I stood on the cusp of my grand reveal. Michael's campaign to control me tightened, each move stoking my resolve to outmaneuver him. His efforts began subtly, like a slow tide eroding ashore. He dropped by unannounced, his eyes scanning my home for signs of decline. A forgotten dish, a misplaced book. Mom, you sure you're managing okay? He'd ask, his tone dripping with false worry. I'd smile, offering him coffee, while inwardly seething. Managing? I'd just negotiated a cash sale that would have made a Wall Street broker sweat. But Michael saw only the gray in my hair, not the steel in my spine. His visits grew more frequent, each one a performance of filial duty. He'd linger in my kitchen, suggesting simpler living arrangements, his words laced with condescension. The attic idea wasn't a suggestion anymore, it was a plan, one he was selling to anyone who'd listen. He enlisted allies with alarming ease. My sister Ellen called one evening, her voice trembling. Michael says you're struggling, Ev. He's worried you'll hurt yourself living alone. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Struggling? I'd spent the morning reviewing leases for my rental properties, calculating yields down to the penny. But Michael's narrative was spreading. Mrs. Callahan, my neighbor, stopped by with a casserole and a pitying look. Michael mentioned you're forgetting things, she said softly. Maybe it's time to let him help. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. These were people I'd shared holidays with, people who'd seen me rebuild my life after my husband's death. Yet they swallowed Michael's story without question, as if 68 years had erased my competence. The lawyer was the final blow. Michael had arranged a meeting with a family attorney, Mr. Grayson, under the guise of updating my will. I sat across from Grayson in his sterile office, Michael at my side, his hand resting on my arm like I might bolt. Grayson, with his crisp suit and patronizing smile, slid a pamphlet across the desk. Guardianship options for seniors. My stomach churned. Guardianship? The word conjured images of locked doors, stripped rights. "It's just a precaution, Mom," Michael said, his voice smooth. "We want to keep you safe." Safe. The word was a cage, and he was trying to lock me in. I nodded, feigning confusion, but my mind raced. This wasn't concern. It was a power grab, and I'd be damned if I let it succeed. Back home, I pored over my files, the deeds and contracts that mapped my empire. Each one was a brick in the fortress I'd built, a shield against the world's doubts. I'd started small, a duplex in Somerville, bought with my late husband's life insurance, then another, and another, each deal sharper than the last. By my 50s, I was flipping commercial properties, outbidding developers who underestimated the housewife in pearls. Now, at 68, I owned 12 properties, from Boston brownstones to a strip mall in Quincy. My tenants paid on time, my books were pristine, and my net worth rivaled CEOs half my age. Yet Michael saw me as a liability, a relic to be shelved. The irony was almost laughable. I kept up my act, letting Michael believe I was wavering. When he brought over paint swatches for my attic room, I pretended to care, nodding as he described the skylight that might brighten the space. The space? A 10 by 12 box with sloping walls where I'd be out of his way. I wanted to shake him, to scream that I'd just secured a $1,800,000 0 cents cottage on Cape Cod, a place where I'd wake to the sound of waves, not his pity. But I held my tongue. Timing was everything, and I wanted him blindsided. Ellen's next call pushed me to the edge. "Michael's talking to a doctor," she whispered, as if betraying a secret. "He thinks you might need evaluation." Evaluation. The word landed like a slap. He was building a case, painting me as senile to justify his control. I pictured him in his sleek office, plotting with professionals who'd never met me, all while I was outbidding investors on a warehouse deal. The audacity of it fueled me. I thanked Ellen, my voice calm, but my hands trembled as I hung up. I wasn't just fighting for my home now. I was fighting for my identity, for the right to be seen as I was, not as Michael imagined. I doubled down on my preparations. The Cape Cod cottage was under contract, the closing set for the week after my Boston sale. I met with Susan, my realtor, to finalize details, her eyes gleaming with respect. "You're a force, Evelyn," she said, handing me the paperwork. I smiled, but inside I was steeling myself for battle. I began packing, sorting through decades of memories. Michael's childhood drawings, my husband's old letter. Each item was a reminder of why I'd fight. I wasn't just Evelyn Harper, widow and mother. I was Evelyn Harper, investor, strategist, survivor. Michael's final push came days before the dinner. He showed up with a social worker, a young woman named Claire, who carried a clipboard and a forced smile. "We're here to assess your needs, Mrs. Harper," she said, glancing at Michael for approval. I let them in, offering tea, playing the part of the docile senior. Claire asked about my daily routine, my medications, my support system. I answered vaguely, watching Michael nod as if I'd confirmed his fears. When they left, I stood at my window, the for sale sign glowing under the streetlight. They thought they had me cornered, but they were wrong. As the dinner approached, I rehearsed my reveal. I'd wait until dessert when the table was warm with wine and chatter. I'd stand, glass in hand, and announce the sale, the cottage, the empire. I imagined Michael's face, shock, shame, maybe even awe. The thought sent a thrill through me. He'd underestimated me, but soon he'd see the truth. At 68, I was sharper, bolder and freer than ever. The stage was set, and I was ready to claim my victory. The dining room glowed under the chandelier's soft light, the table set with my mother's china for the occasion. I'd invited Ellen, Mrs. Callahan, my financial advisor, Mr. Brooks, and of course, Michael and his wife, Sarah. The aroma of roasted turkey and sage stuffing filled the air, a nod to the Thanksgiving spirit, but my mind was on war, not warmth. I wore a tailored navy dress, my silver hair swept into an elegant bun, every inch the woman Michael refused to see. As guests arrived, I played the gracious host, pouring wine, deflecting Michael's solicitous glances. "You look tired, Mom," he said, his hand on my shoulder. I smiled thinly, my pulse quickening. Tired? I was electric. Dinner unfolded with forced cheer. Ellen chatted about her garden, Mrs. Callahan rambled about her grandkids, and Mr. Brooks droned about market trends. Michael, seated across from me, kept the conversation light, but his eyes betrayed him, watchful, calculating, as if waiting for me to slip. Sarah, quieter than usual, sensed the undercurrent but said nothing. I let the small talk flow, biding my time, my fingers tracing the stem of my wine glass. Sale papers, signed and final, sat in my study, a grenade waiting to be lobbed. The Cape Cod cottage, with its ocean views and promise of freedom, was mine, the ink barely dry on the deed. As dessert, apple pie with vanilla ice cream, was served, I felt the moment ripen. Michael leaned back, smug, recounting a story about helping me organize my bills. "We've got to keep things simple for Mom," he said, glancing at Ellen for approval. She nodded, and Mrs. Callahan murmured agreement. The room was a chorus of condescension, and I'd had enough. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the hardwood. All eyes turned to me, forks pausing midair. The silence was thick, expectant, and I savored it. "Michael," I began, my voice steady but laced with steel, "you've been so worried about me, haven't you?" He frowned, sensing a shift, but nodded. I turned to the table, meeting each gaze. "All of you have? Worried I'm too old, too frail to manage my life? Worried I need to be tucked away in an attic? Out of sight?" Michael's face paled, his fork clattering to his plate. Sarah's eyes widened and Ellen shifted uncomfortably. I pressed on, my words deliberate. "Well, I have news. I sold this house last week for $2,500,000, 0 cents. Cash." The room froze. Michael's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mrs. Callahan gasped, her hand clutching her napkin. Mr. Brooks, who doubted my acumen, stared as if I'd sprouted wings. I let the shock settle, then delivered the killing blow. "And that's just one piece of my portfolio. My properties, 12 of them, are worth $9 million, 0 cents. I've never needed saving, Michael." My voice cut through the silence, sharp and unyielding. "I've been building empires while you planned my cage." Michael slumped, his face a mask of disbelief. "Mom, how? Why didn't you tell me?" he stammered, his voice cracking. I held his gaze, unflinching. "Because you didn't ask, you assumed." The words landed like a slap, and he flinched. Sarah reached for his hand, her eyes darting between us. But I wasn't done. I turned to the others, my tone softening but firm. "Ellen, Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Brooks. You believed him. You saw my age, not me. But I'm not your stereotype. I'm Evelyn Harper, and I choose my path." The air was heavy, charged with shame and awe. Ellen's eyes glistened, her voice barely a whisper. "Ev, I'm so sorry." Mrs. Callahan nodded, mute, her casserole days forgotten. Mr. Brooks cleared his throat, mumbling about impressive foresight. But Michael was my focus. He looked small, stripped of his certainty, grappling with the mother he'd misjudged. I felt a pang of pity, but it didn't soften my resolve. This moment was mine, earned through years of silent victories. I raised my glass, my voice steady now, almost warm. "To new beginnings," I said. "I've bought a cottage on Cape Cod. I move next week. You're all welcome to visit, on my terms." The toast was a bridge, not a surrender. I sipped the wine sharp on my tongue and sat down. The table erupted in murmurs, questions tumbling over each other. "Cape Cod? 9 million? When did this happen?" I answered sparingly, letting them stew in their curiosity. Michael stayed silent, his eyes fixed on his plate, processing the wreckage of his assumptions. As coffee was served, I slipped into the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of reclaiming my power. I'd done it. I'd shattered the narrative that had bound me, exposed the truth in a blaze of defiance. The cottage awaited, its porch calling me to a life of my own design. I pictured mornings there, coffee in hand, the Atlantic stretching before me, free from Michael's pity. Back at the table, Michael finally met my eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "I didn't know." There was no defense, just raw honesty. I nodded, not forgiving yet, but open to the possibility. The others watched, sensing the shift. The dinner ended awkwardly, guests departing with hurried goodbyes, leaving Michael and Sarah behind. As they left, Michael paused at the door. "Can we talk soon?" he asked. I nodded again, my heart softening, but my guard up. This was my victory, but the war for respect wasn't over. I stood in my empty dining room, the chandelier dimming as I flicked off the switch. The sale was done, the cottage mine, my empire secure. Michael's campaign had failed, and I'd emerged not just unscathed, but triumphant. At 68, I was no longer his mother to be managed. I was Evelyn Harper, a force unstoppable, ready to write my next chapter. The move to Cape Cod was a whirlwind. By mid-November, I'd packed my Boston life into boxes, each one a piece of my past. Michael's old report cards, my late husband's watch, photos of summers long gone. The Chatham cottage welcomed me with open arms. Its shingle exterior glowing under the winter sun, the Atlantic's roar a constant companion. The wraparound porch, where I sipped coffee each morning, became my sanctuary. At $1,800,000, 0 cents, it was more than a home. It was my fortress of freedom, a place where I answered to no one. I hung sheer curtains, planted lavender in the garden, and let the sea air wash away the sting of Michael's betrayal. Settling in, I found a rhythm. I walked the beach daily, my sneakers sinking into the sand, my mind clear and sharp. At 68, I felt more alive than I had in years. The locals, a mix of retirees and young families, were curious about the new woman from Boston. I shared my story sparingly, but word of my real estate success spread. Soon, neighbors knocked, asking for advice. "How do you start investing at my age?" asked Mrs. Larson, a 72-year-old widow with a modest pension. I invited her in, sketched out a plan: small rentals, low risk, steady returns. Her eyes lit up, and I saw myself in her, a woman ready to defy expectations. That spark ignited something bigger. I started a weekly coffee group at the Chatham Community Center, calling it Silver Ambition. It was for seniors like me, people society often overlooked. We met in a cozy room with ocean views, sharing dreams over muffins and decaf. There was Tom, 70, who wanted to open a bookstore. Maria, 66, eyeing a food truck. And Mrs. Larson, now scouting her first duplex. I taught them what I knew: market analysis, negotiation, resilience. Age is just a number, I'd say, echoing my own journey. Your ambition doesn't retire. The group grew, drawing folks from as far as Hyannis. Local papers ran a story, dubbing me Cape Cod Senior Mogul. I laughed, but the title felt right. Inspiring others healed me, but Michael's silence lingered like a bruise. He hadn't called since the dinner, and I hadn't reached out. Part of me wanted him to stew, to feel the weight of his mistake. But another part, the mother who'd bandaged his scraped knees, missed him. Sarah, his wife, texted occasionally. Tentative updates about their kids, a photo of my granddaughter's soccer game. I replied warmly, but kept my distance, waiting for Michael to make the first move. He'd underestimated me, and trust, once broken, wasn't easily rebuilt. That move came in January, 2 months after the dinner. I was pruning my lavender when Michael's car pulled into my driveway. My heart thudded, but I kept my composure, shears in hand. He stepped out, his face drawn, no trace of the smugness I'd seen at dinner. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "can we talk?" I nodded, leading him to the porch. The ocean roared behind us, a fitting backdrop for what felt like a reckoning. He sat, hands clasped, and looked at me not as a problem to manage, but as a person. "I was wrong," he began, his words halting. "I thought I was protecting you, but I didn't see you, not really." His eyes, so like his father's, glistened. That dinner, what you said, it hit me hard. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. The apology was raw, unguarded, and it cracked something in me. I wanted to stay angry, to hold him at arm's length, but I saw my son, not the adversary. I know you meant well, I said softly, but you hurt me, Michael. You assumed I was less because of my age. He nodded, swallowing hard. I see that now. You're incredible. We talked for hours, the winter sun dipping low. I told him about my properties, the deals I'd made, the risks I'd taken. He listened, not with pity, but with awe. How did I miss this? He asked, shaking his head. I smiled a little sadly. You weren't looking. By the time he left, we'd found a fragile peace. He hugged me, a real hug, not the perfunctory kind. Can I come back? He asked. Anytime, I said, meaning it. The bridge wasn't fully rebuilt, but the foundation was there. Michael started visiting monthly, bringing Sarah and the kids. My granddaughter Lily loved the beach, collecting shells while I told her about mortgages. Simple lessons for a 10-year-old, but seeds for her future. Sarah confided that Michael had changed, questioning his assumptions, even apologizing to Ellen and Mrs. Callahan. I saw it too in his questions about my work, his respect for my choices. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough for now. My Silver Ambition group became my legacy. By spring, Mrs. Larson closed on her duplex. Tom opened his bookstore, and Maria's food truck was a hit at the farmers market. I spoke at a regional senior expo, sharing my story to a packed room. You're never too old to dream, I told them, my voice carrying the weight of my triumph. Applause thundered, and I felt like I was 30 again, unstoppable. Back home, I framed the expo's flyer, hanging it beside a photo of my car. This was my life, built on my terms. As summer bloomed, I stood on my porch, the Atlantic stretching before me. Michael's betrayal had scarred me, but it had also set me free. I'd reclaimed my power, inspired a community, and found a way to forgive. At 68, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My empire, a beacon for others. The future was mine, and I'd ride it with the same boldness that had brought me here. The sun rose over my Chatham cottage, its golden rays dancing on the Atlantic, a daily reminder of the freedom I'd claimed. My story rippled beyond Chatham. The local paper's senior mogul article caught the eye of a Boston radio host who invited me to share my tale. I spoke of outsmarting Michael's guardianship scheme, of building an empire from a widow's grit, of teaching seniors that ambition knows no expiration date. Listeners flooded the station with calls. Women in their 70s dreaming of new ventures, men in their 60s inspired to reclaim their voices. Each story fueled me, proof that my defiance had lit a spark. I wasn't just Evelyn Harper, I was a movement, challenging America's obsession with youth and its dismissal of the old. Michael's visits grew warmer. He'd bring Lily, who'd run to the beach while we talked investments. You're my hero, Grandma, she said once, clutching a shell. Her words, simple yet profound, were my crown. Michael, too, had changed, questioning his biases, even joining a Silver Ambition meeting to hear Mrs. Larson's duplex success. His respect, hard-won, was sweeter than any deal I'd closed. We weren't fully healed. Trust takes time, but we were building something new, rooted in truth. My legacy took shape in the lives I touched. Tom's bookstore thrived, Maria's food truck drew crowds, and Mrs. Larson mentored others, echoing my lessons. At the Senior Expo, I'd seen eyes light up, hands scribbling notes as I spoke of independence. That was my gift, not just wealth, but the courage to claim it. America, with its rugged individualism, loves a comeback. And mine resonated because it defied the script, old age as decline. I showed that 68 could be a beginning, not an end. Standing on my porch, the sea breeze in my hair, I reflected on my path. Michael's betrayal had been a crucible, forging me anew. I'd faced doubt, from bankers in my 40s to my own son, and turned it into power. Ageism, that quiet thief, had tried to shrink me, but I'd grown larger. My empire a shield, my voice a sword. I forgave Michael not out of weakness but grace, a choice as bold as selling my home. That grace paired with my defiance was my true triumph. I looked to the horizon, where the ocean met the sky and felt limitless. At 68, I was writing my story, not closing it. To every senior watching, I'd say, what dreams lie dormant in you? What empire waits to be built? Age is no cage unless you let it be. My cottage, my group, my family, they were proof that ambition endures, that independence is ageless. I'd keep teaching, keep fighting, keep living, because Evelyn Harper wasn't done, not by a long shot.